Good afternoon, folks. I've been with Monroe a whole year and a month, so I'm new to Monroe still. A lot to learn. I've learned from a lot of the folks in the room. I've also only been in higher ed for 1 year, so while I have a lot of experience in other areas, learning a little bit about higher ed is a high priority for me. So, one quick question to gauge the audience. How many people are in IT? Can you raise your hand? I'm going to ask. That would be 1, 2. Okay, 2 sort of. Okay, so glad I didn't make my presentation too techy. So let's see. I'm going to ask a series of 3 questions today and a couple of sub-questions. The first one is, how grim is your cybersecurity risk today? And I'll ask a question, does anybody here know what FUD is? F-U-D. Anybody ever hear that term before? Apparently not. So FUD is short for fear, uncertainty, and doubt. And that's something that sales and marketing teams use to get us to want to recognize our fears and then want to use them for whatever product or service they have. So it happens both professionally and personally in our lives. I'm going to use FUD in a slightly different way to kind of set the tone for what cyber risk looks like these days. So here's a couple of questions I'm going to ask, and just raise your hand. You don't have to say the answer. Just raise your hand if you think this is the case. Whose security team, cybersecurity team, is being expected to do more with less? Whose cyber team is being expected to do more with less? A lot of you. Wow. Whose security team is currently understaffed? Okay, good number. This is a little bit techy, but you might have a response. Whose cybersecurity technology suite has at least one gap? So think about it this way. You have tools, you have services. How many of you think there's at least one gap in your cybersecurity suite? Raise your hand. Okay. Then as far as cybersecurity, the active threat environment right now, what we're all facing, how many think the cybersecurity risk environment right now is the same or worse than last year? Raise your hand if you think it's the same or worse. Okay. How many think it's definitely worse? Okay. So, some of the FUD on staffing and gaps. Make sure I came up right. So, this is a poll, a couple of slides I'll have. A company called Alert Media, who does emergency response, did a survey of a large number of people and asked them these exact questions. I've used other surveys. They all point in the same direction. So 64% of security teams are expected to do more with less. So that's where teams are struggling sometimes because they just are being asked to do more than they are capable of. And almost 60% think that their cybersecurity team is understaffed. Same sort of message. 93% of the people asked think that there are gaps in their cybersecurity suite, meaning they're missing something, whether it's a tool, a vendor, software, something. So 93%, and this is not just higher ed, by the way. This is across a wide variety of industries. So 93% feel that there is a gap. And it's getting worse. So the other questions I asked here. 68% of the people thought that the threat environment is either the same or worse than last year, and 45% say it's definitely worse than last year. So the problem is definitely getting worse. The number of cyber issues, if somebody feels like they can answer, how many cyber issues do you think your college or university is facing per year? Anybody want to venture a guess? There's not a right or a wrong. Nobody wants to volunteer. I'll just show you.
Hundreds.
You say hundreds?
Yeah.
It's a lot more than hundreds. It's tens of thousands.
Tens of thousands.
So this is a tool that IT and cyber organizations use. These are the threats that a company called MITRE typically is on behalf of the government, gathering information about threats that are out there. That could be hardware, that could be software, that could be services. These are threats that every cybersecurity team may have to deal with, but that's the number. And it's this year they expect it to be nearly 70,000. So, sorry, you won on The Price is Right, but you didn't. It is large. And this is when you combine this with staffs that are being asked to do more with less, understaffed, that's a big gap. That's a risk that we all have to be concerned about.
Actually, I knew the right answer. I saw your slides.
So one thing you might notice is the trend is accelerating. And one of the main reasons is AI. This is the bad side of AI. The threat actors, the bad guys, whatever you want to call it, they're using these tools. And fortunately, so are the vendors that are there to help protect us. But ultimately, it's an arms race. Everybody's using this. It's not going to end. If you think you've gotten to a cybersecurity program that is done and doesn't have to be adjusted, that's fundamentally wrong. It never ends. So AI is definitely the accelerant here. And I know some of the vendors we're working with are emphasizing that as part of their programs, their tools, and their technologies. But it's increasing rapidly. Question 2. Will you pass your Title IV GLBA cyber audit? This is something I had not experienced because I hadn't been in higher ed. I've gone through many audits from regulators, auditors, et cetera, but this was a new one for me. So Dan Sharon, who's sitting back there, our head of financial aid, when we were going through this, I asked him, well, what would happen if we failed the audit? And Dan, I know it wasn't quite this extreme, he said we'd be out of business. Now, I know there's a lot of steps that would go before that if you had a finding and you'd have opportunity to remediate it, but this is very serious. It's not optional. Having spent time in financial services, this is stuff I'd come across 10, 15 years ago. These sorts of requirements are not optional. And by the way, hope is not a strategy. If you just hope it's going to work, it's not good enough. So, within Title IV, there are 9 cyber elements. These are the things that we are all required to do. And I'll go through a quick explanation of what some of these are. Number 1, designating a qualified individual. That typically, for most organizations, would be a CISO or a CISO or a Chief Information Security Officer. How many people have a Chief Information Security Officer? Not even half.
We did it.
Yeah. So.
We're out of compliance.
And the Chief Information Security Officer is typically a dedicated role. It's not something that somebody's doing in combination with something else. You need to conduct risk assessments. These risk assessments can be done internally, externally, or both. The best practice is to do both. People typically use external when they don't have the skills internally, or they use internal only if they can't afford to do it externally. But the best practice is to do both. You're getting basically 2 opinions on the same topic, is to assess your risks. After that, you design and implement safeguards. So basically, you get your risks, and then you have to decide what to do with them. In most cases, you'd like to remediate them. You want to fix them. You want to improve upon things. However, you don't have to fix them all. You are allowed to risk accept something, meaning my organization is willing to accept the risk as it is, and I'm choosing, at least for now, not to do anything or not to fully remediate it. But ideally, you're going to want to have many more that you're remediating. So you've found your risks, you come up with a plan on how to remediate them. Then you need to test and monitor. Most people do a pretty good job of monitoring, saying I'm doing these things, I'm making sure they're happening, but a lot of people don't test. If something bad happens, what do you do? And that is an important part of it, and one that's often missed, but clearly it's now part of what we are all expected to do. We need to train personnel. I don't like the term personnel. I think in higher ed it means train everybody. We typically are going to focus on faculty and staff, but I certainly think students have to be a part of the picture also. They might not be the same kind of training that the rest of us do as faculty and staff members, but they arguably need some training. Right now we do faculty and staff, but we should be doing it for our students, and we're thinking about how best to do that. Oversee service partners. In other areas, that's called TPRM, or third-party risk management. How many people know about the Canvas outage? I'm not asking, do you use Canvas? How many people know about Canvas's outage? Canvas is a third party. That's not an internal-based system. That is something those organizations that use it, Monroe doesn't happen to, that third party had a problem. They were attacked, and it happened right during, for many schools, final exams. That was a big deal. I would imagine those of you, if any of you use Canvas, you were very worried about how you would handle that. I don't know, I have not heard of any lawsuits of any sort because of it, but you don't know. But the reality is we have to keep an eye on all our third parties because we're fully dependent on them to run critical parts of our businesses. And you need to do, the basics are, before you bring them on board, you do an assessment of them. There are a variety of ways to do that, and then you look at that annually at least. There are services that you can bring on board to help you with that, but it's certainly a big part of what we all experience. I would say for Monroe, right now, we have one significant system we run internally. The rest is outsourced to a SaaS or a cloud vendor in some sort. So we have that risk, we all do, for any third parties we use. There's also the thought of fourth party risk. Like, what the heck is fourth party risk? Third party risk is the direct relationship we have with those vendors. Fourth parties are the vendors they use. So Canvas may have been using somebody else to develop code. They might use AWS to host their systems. Those are other pieces of the puzzle that we all have to be cognizant of. And you would have to ask your third parties, how do you assess the vendors they rely on? We have to keep our security programs updated, as we do with pretty much anything. You keep improving as we can. Establish an incident response plan. So, Canvas is an example. Canvas goes down. What do you do? Are we back to, a chalkboard and chalk? Or are we doing pencil and paper for exams? What are we doing? And Dr. Coltman back there is nodding her head. She doesn't want to think about what would have happened if this for us, but it is something we have to consider. We have to have an incident response program. And the hardest part of an incident response program is tabletop exercises or testing it. Just because you have a nice piece of paper that says what you're going to do, you need to test it. Arguably, you do it annually, or if there's some significant change in your environment. You learn a lot in doing that. I've been through this for a variety of reasons over many companies. Every time you do a tabletop, every time I've done a tabletop exercise, we've learned at least 5 things we need to do better in some fashion. So that testing is very important. Even though it's not, quote, required as part of this, I suggest it really should be. I think Howard has a point.
I have a question, actually.
Sure.
When you have a third-party servicer in the financial aid arena, okay, first of all, that has to be reported to the department, and it's part of the participation agreement and the ECAR. When we get audited, the Title IV audit you're talking about, we have to collect and give them our third parties' audits as well. And if those third parties don't pass their audits, then we do not pass our audit. So my question is, in the technology arena, like Canvas, do they have audits? Do you collect? You don't use Canvas, but let's call it Slate or whatever you're using. Do they have audits, and do you collect them?
We don't do it as much as we should, which is probably the answer for many people. And we are actually going through an exercise for a variety of reasons of collecting who our vendors are, what the contracts are. That's part of it. That's kind of maybe called the financial and legal end of it. The technology is part of it. There are various ways they would have a third-party audit or assess them. SOC audits, SAS audits, there's a whole bunch of types of audits they can do. What most vendors do these days, if they're mature, is they will have on their public website a place to go and download these assessments so you can see them. But for a proper program, you need to look at them on a periodic basis, again, typically annually, to do that. If they don't have a third party that's assessed them, that would be a red flag in my book. You'd say, how can we rely on you, trust you, if you don't even know how well you're doing? And we're relying on them. So I can't tell you what Canvas had. I can tell you we spoke to a number of our key vendors right after that and just said, what assessments have you done, what have you had? So we've got, we're incomplete right now, but we're moving towards that for a variety of reasons. And you guys know better than I, what other regulators or others that can scrutinize us. Middle states, I know, is a very big thing for us right now at Monroe, Department of Ed. You guys probably know the list better than I do. But any number of them can start putting these sorts of criteria in place. And I'm going to, on the next page, talk about something. But I want to ask a question. Did I answer your question?
Yes, you did, sir. Thank you.
How many of you, in looking at this list, feel confident that you could pass at least one? Raise your hand if you think you could pass at least one of these questions. Okay. How about who thinks they can pass 4 of these? Looking at these. How about 7? How many can pass 7 out of 9? Less hands. Who thinks it can pass all of them? And I will put my hand down because it was a bit of a struggle in some areas for us. So we all have some work to do. Okay, next, kind of Title IV, what I'll call cyber scrutiny. So again, having been through this in financial services for many years, there's a couple of phases. The old way, well, actually, I'll go back. When Dan came to me and said, oh, we have a Title IV audit we're doing. And I, in my head, said, what the heck is that? And Dan, fortunately, has been through several of them, maybe more than several, and explained to me what it was and what was required. He said, they want a copy of our IT policies, update them, send them to me, and he'll send them off to them. And he said last year, that was it. That's all you had to do was send it to him. So basically, the old way is gathering. You gather up the information they asked for, hand it to them, and you're done. So we gathered up our policies. Dan was coordinating that effort with the auditor, and I thought we were done. Whew. I could move on to the next request. But the new way is something different. The auditor assessed what we gave them. They didn't just take it, put it on a shelf, and say, check, done. They looked at what we sent them, and they came back with feedback and said, this isn't quite good enough. Now, we were fortunate that we were able to make some adjustments so that we did, ultimately, there was no finding, there was nothing significant, but that was a change. It wasn't just gathering information anymore. It was assessing that information. And I'm sure in the other parts of the Title IV audit, that has been going on for years. But for the cyber part of it, that was new, at least relative to Monroe's experience. What I would suggest in the future, and this is based on experience in financial services and just going through a lot of these, there's going to be a new bar set, and it's going to be proving it. It's not going to be good enough to send them the policies. We're going to have to prove what we do. Nobody has said that, but it's a natural progression, and I've seen it many times before. So as an example, if we said, oh, we have, as the case we do with Monroe, we do monthly cyber awareness training, and it's required. Okay. It used to be we just send them that policy. Now they're going to assess it. I think in the future they're going to want us to prove it. And they may even want to look over our shoulders. They're not going to take a screenshot. They're not going to take a spreadsheet. They want to see us, whether it's virtually in person, prove that we actually did what we said we were supposed to do. And I've been through that. Somebody literally sitting over my shoulder saying, oh, show me the checkbox that says on a monthly basis, you send out cyber awareness training notifications. And show me that you actually did it. What was the number of people that completed it? So at some point, the proof is going to be part of it. It may not be next year. It may be a couple of years down the road. But this is a natural progression based on my experience. And I learned another lesson. What are the things that they asked for? Oh, I didn't mention it, number 9, back here. Report to the board of directors. Typically, the first person on the answer to question number 1, which is a CISO or similar, will have to do a periodic report to the board of trustees, which is probably more likely the board of directors. So I saw that question. I said, good. I've done multiple reports to the board of trustees. I'm good. Took out the PowerPoints, redacted the things that shouldn't be in there, sent it off to the auditor. I said, we're good. They came back and said, nope, not good enough. Where's your policy? And I was kind of taken aback. Like, well, I showed you we did it, because I kind of jumped into the future. I proved it to you. It wasn't good enough. We didn't have a policy. Now, fortunately, a relatively straightforward policy to create and did that. So, but you have to have, well, they didn't ask for the proof. They asked for the policy, and I had not given them the policy. Gave them the policy, and we were done. but it's a more complex set of requirements now when you start to look at their assessments of what we provide and potentially in the future proving that we actually do it. How are you reducing your cyber risk? I was speaking to someone who was at one of the member organizations here. I won't say who it was, and it was when very early in my time at Monroe, and that person, not from Monroe, said, we'd be in great shape if we could just get rid of all of our students. And I thought that was humorous, but it was also a good learning experience for me to say, it's a different world than what I was accustomed to. When you only have, what in essence, employees, faculty, and staff, that's a different world than students who have a high rate of turnover, don't look at risk the same way, and they're young people, typically. I know we have some older students also, but that's a different world. I had to think differently than I had before, but it was an interesting comment. Okay, question. How many people have seen Jurassic Park, the movie? Most people, okay. For those that haven't, it's a movie about dinosaurs, and it's about how they create a park, and they want people to come and like Disneyfy it and look around. For those that may remember it or not, the IT person in Jurassic Park was Newman, for those who follow Seinfeld. So Newman was the IT guy, and that alone should tell you something. But the reason Jurassic Park went off the rails, all the dinosaurs got out, all kinds of havoc, was because Newman, the only IT person, created a problem on the systems and ran away trying to do whatever he was going to do. He ended up dying in the end, which is, potentially the right thing. But the reality is, the entire fiasco of Jurassic Park would have been avoided if they actually had 2 IT people. Now, I don't suggest anybody here has only 1 IT person, but it is food for thought. Do you have the right people in the right seats, and do you have enough of them to make sure, whether it's cybersecurity or other parts of technology? I would imagine you can ask that question for every department. Do you have the right number? But in this case, it was an extreme example of one IT guy caused everything to go to hell, and the dinosaurs escaped. So, what is Monroe doing as it relates to cyber improvements? We've done a number of things. Some of this was started before I began my career at Monroe. I've helped usher them along or improve them. But we implemented a 24/7/365 SOC. And a SOC is a Security Operations Center. We outsourced that to a third party risk. We are dependent on a third party to do this. But we were not 24/7 in any department, certainly not in IT. Our definition of 24/7 was, call the guy, call the gal, call the person who's asleep at 3 o'clock in the morning. So we outsource this, and what they do for us is we send all the logs and alerts to this vendor. They have a system that correlates that and do certain things in an automated fashion. Certain things require somebody in that organization. They can take action themselves, and sometimes they need to work with us. They will reach out to us and say, this seems strange. What do you think? Or they don't have access to every system, so we would need to do something. But there is multiple people awake looking at this on our behalf. Next thing we did, we upgraded our infrastructure and our tools, so hardware, software, monitoring systems. We upgraded a bunch of things there. We retained an incident response partner. So we have, on retainer, paid the money up front. We have a company that, if we were to have an incident, they would help us with how do we remediate it, how do we investigate it, et cetera. But they are not doing that 24/7. They are ready for our phone call 24/7, but they're actively not doing anything for Monroe. We hired a CISO, and we're adding 3 more cybersecurity people to reporting to that person. I'm not going to say the titles because they won't mean anything to people in the room. We're doing a third-party assessment. The Center for Internet Security, they have a methodology that a third party is running through us. What they've asked us was 153 questions about the way we tackle cybersecurity, and there's 18 levels of controls around that. And we expect to get the report in the next couple of weeks. This one's a bit techie, implemented Active Directory. Active Directory is the mechanism we all use to log in every day. Well, most of us, I assume most people use Active Directory. And it's one of the first priorities for any cyber attack is to get control of Active Directory because it controls security for everybody. So we've implemented a system with a third party's help that replicates our Active Directory both on-prem and to the cloud. And it's immutable, and what that means for those who aren't familiar with it, people can't delete it, people can't alter it. So we have that gold copy, and it replicates throughout the day so that if we needed to recover, we could do so. We also do something that's very important and is often very challenging, is testing. Every time we say we do something, we arguably should be testing it. In this case, we did a test. We couldn't do a full test because that would mean interrupting our production environment, which we didn't want to do. So we created a test environment and used the cloud copy of Active Directory, moved it into our test Active Directory environment, and now feel more confident because we've done that test. I can tell you, we learned a lot during that test, as I alluded to before. There's probably 6, 7 different things that we said, oh, nothing major, but minor things that would reduce the recovery time, which is what it's all about. If you have an outage, you want to get it back up and running for whatever, whether it's an outage, a cyber attack, whatever it is, you want to get it back up and running as quickly as possible. And we are going to do that test at least once a year. We implemented MFA, multi-factor authentication. We all probably have in one, professionally or personally, something that challenges us. User ID, password, something else, whether it's a text message, an app you have on your phone or something else. That's that multi-factor authentication. We're starting to implement that. We've already done it for all of our servers, all of our IT people, and we're testing it now with some HR people. So this is an additional layer of multi-factor that if you walk away from your machine, the screen locks. When you log back in, most people are accustomed to just name, user ID and password. In our case, for these people, will be an additional MFA for them. Whew. And the last thing we are doing is doing more frequent penetration testing and vulnerability assessments. The quick and dirty on that, penetration testing is testing from the outside in, typically is the way people look at it. So somebody who's not on your network, what can they do? How can they get in? And vulnerability assessments typically on the internal side. So you start from the inside and see what's going on inside. We recognized we weren't doing this as frequently as we should, so we're going to do it more frequently and we're going to do it more robustly. This helps identify the risks. Going back to having to do risk assessments, this is one of the mechanisms you can use to do risk assessments. Okay, all right. Thank you. Okay, thank you. Howard, if there are questions, we'll take it at the end after Howard speaks. And he also will have my contact information when he's done.
All I could say is that your presentation was spectacular.
Oh, thank you.
And thank God for people like you. We need our IT people. I need the buttons.
Here you go, sir.
Thank you. So I decided that I wanted to start at the very beginning, so I'm going to give you a slight history lesson. I think it's important to know the background. Of course, my presentation is going to be at a different level than the presentation you just heard. So you could sing to, do, re, mi, anyway. So starting at the beginning, I've always recommended that the Financial Aid Office, share new federal regulations with those responsible for cybersecurity as soon as I receive it. So the most recent thing that I say that I was interacting with our tech people with, our CISO, if you will, is when FAFSA simplification came and all of a sudden there was FTI to protect. And it would be very much not a good thing if that was ever accessed by people that should not. So I immediately put that into his attention because, again, we count on people like you. But at the same time, I firmly believe that financial aid offices should have their own policy on technology, data security, et cetera. You don't have to, it's not required. You are required to have something. It could be part of the greater body of the school, but I personally believe that financial aid offices should have their own, because we do have access to all kinds of student data, and that if it was accessed accidentally or on purpose, God forbid, that would not be a good thing to do. And also red flag policies. That's huge in the financial aid community, at least. What that simply means, a red flag is something happens once, okay, that's not a trend. I think I heard that actually earlier today or yesterday, and someone else said it. But if it happens a second time, then you have a problem. And that's considered a red flag. In other words, you have a problem, you better do something about it, and the requirement of the red flag is that you have change your policy to prevent what was happening to happen again. So, again, I wanted to take you through a little bit of a history lesson in financial aid. I'll do this quickly. Pre-2000, okay, FAFSAs were all paper-based. And security data issues were very little on our mind. It was the least of our concerns at the time. And then also in the early 2000s, there became a shift to the FAFSA introduction and a rapid growth of FAFSA on the web. As I mentioned earlier, yesterday, that I was on the ELM Advisory Board, and our intent was, or their intent, I was just on the board, was to create a floppy disk FAFSA, and the department said, "Nuh-uh, you're not doing that, we're going full electronic," and FAFSA on the web was born. So then was the start of growing concerns about false identities and things of that nature. Nothing severe, but it started at that point. Then 2010 and 11, the program integrity verification rules came out, and that's the start of verification groups. Who here is familiar with verification groups besides you two? All right, at one point, I think we had 5 verification groups, and we're down to 4. And I'm going to get a lot more into the detail of verifications 4 and 5 in just a bit. So that was in dear colleague Gen 1103, and we became responsible. Okay, we were always responsible, but now it was officially in regulation. Then in 2012 to 15, identity theft and unusual enrollment history became an issue. Okay, that's unusual enrollment history is when students come and go to different colleges and they don't earn credits, they receive financial aid and move on, and that became an issue that the department wanted us to focus on. So it was a government issue. We were required to collect government-issued photo IDs that were not expired, and that started at that point. 2016 to 2020, increased fraud awareness. There was a growth of online distance education, if nothing else, because of COVID. And needless to say, online is our biggest risk when it comes, at least from the financial aid perspective, of identity theft. So that's when that started to rise. Fraud rings were becoming a major issue in the mid 2016 to 20. And we're expected to strengthen internal controls, use professional judgment and documentation review, and continued emphasis on resolving conflicting information. Then 2023, pandemic and the remote verification challenges. We were given some waivers back then. They eased up on the rules a bit, but that was temporary. But that did cause some issues, and the department was finding more and more identity theft as a result of that. Now, we're at the present. Okay, so I took you through a small history lesson. We're at the present. And the most recent thing is the FAFSA Simplification Act, as I just mentioned earlier. As soon as that became real, an FTI, which is federal tax information, in case you don't know it, and that information is now coming directly from the IRS. Okay, so anything that's coming directly from the IRS we need to protect, or get fines, jail time, and all kinds of good stuff. So other things that cause concern is AI-driven issues, and it's actually causing ghost students, and I actually named this presentation Ghost Students. And with ghost students, we actually are experiencing now, again, I haven't personally experienced it, but I do a lot of reading, where students now, or non-students, pretend students, actually can create images of themselves or other people and generate the licenses, driver's license, et cetera. And the fact that we do video intake of students to prove their identity and take screenshots, et cetera, that's becoming a problem because they can now create that with using AI. So AI is becoming a real nemesis for the purposes of protecting financial aid. So the FAFSA simplification, again, it wasn't simplification. It was complification, is what we call it, and it caused all kinds of issues. But FTI was definitely, and data security concerns were increased significantly. And again, I've addressed the FTI already, so that's what this slide's about. GLBA, okay, I'm not going to get into the heavy duties of that because it's up to people like John to take care of that on our behalf, but it does fall in the financial aid arena, which is why you had to cover it in the Title IV audit. And remember, folks, when you have a Title IV audit, it's not an audit of the financial aid office, it's an audit of the college. So I'm not going to get into any major details about that. It's been very well covered here. So then administrative capability, adequate internal controls, secure systems for handling Title IV data are required. And this means financial aid officers must have clear, documented processes for protecting student data and FTI, even if aligned to a broader institutional policy. That's what I said earlier. It could be part of the broad institutional policy, but I think financial aid offices should have their own data security policy. And I'll just bring it down to really something really simple and something that really ticks me off, used to tick me off, and I'm not on campus to see it anymore. How many times have you seen one of your staff leave their computer on and not shut it down or close out? Okay, so you haven't seen it, you're not admitting to having seen it, but I've seen it. And all a bad actor has to do is get access to one computer on campus, and you have problems that he's not going to be happy with. So in our policies and procedures that are, okay, so I retired from Berkeley, but I'm still doing a lot of work with them, so I still say our. Our policy is very clear about closing down your computers. We have very strict FTI guidelines and who can deal with it or not. Originally, the department was very unclear who could see FTI, and we were telling our institutional research people that they could not see the FTI and deal with it for institutional research, but then the department backed down on that. So basically, institutional research can have access, obviously financial aid, and obviously your auditors, and that's really about it. So what's recommended, or what I recommend, is multiple layers. Okay, so number one, institutional policy, central data security, GLBA policy, IT security standards, incident response plan. Okay, basically everything John was saying, and he said a lot more. Second layer would be functional procedures, financial aid specific, how financial aid staff access the FAFSA, ISAR, FTI data. Store and transmit documents. Another one of the things that we invented, if you will, or we didn't invent, but we implemented, was something called BurkeBox. And using one of the softwares that we already had, and this created a secure environment for students to send us information. If they emailed us information, we would not accept it. Okay, not responding to that email, because that means that it's going back and forth, the same information is going back and forth. If there's data and information in an email or fax, fax can be good. It depends upon who owns the fax. If it's Home Depot, then you have Office Depot. Then you have a problem because the image remains in the box. So if it isn't the student's fax machine, then you have exposure there. So that's basically what we were doing with that. Store and transmit documents. We now make sure that's secure, verify identity, handle conflicting information, FTI-specific controls, no unauthorized redisclosure, and secure document imaging, etc. Finally, layer number 3 is training, and acknowledgement of annual financial aid staff training. So that's something that, again, I put into play at Berkeley College, where all training is now documented on anything and everything regarding financial aid, not just this. But you need to document that the training took place. Again, about FTI handling, data security expectations, and documented sign-offs. As I said, I called this presentation Go Students, so I just created this. And the big problem now is the students are using AI. Well, come to the rescue, the department's now using AI. And this is the latest thing that's come off the hot of the presses. So what we now have is real-time fraud detection capabilities by the department. And they're using AI to fight AI. And we're getting common codes, and I'm going to go through this very quickly because I know we're running out of time. They go through common codes, and it's low risk, moderate risk, high risk, and highest risk. And for the high risk, you are absolutely required to collect that one piece of government non-expired picture ID, government ID. And you can collect it in person, or again, you could do it over Zoom or a Teams meeting. But again, that's becoming a little bit insecure as well because of AI. It's becoming that sophisticated. With the highest risk, my recommendation for Berkeley, because I was involved, I think that's why I'm here, I was involved with it, and that's code 357. That's the highest risk, and which is probably going to be online students. And these are people that department's AI, one, say they're very high risk, and two, they could not confirm with the student that they really are a student. And it still comes to us and passes us along. So my recommendation and what we're doing at Berkeley is anyone who's at that highest risk must come in person, okay? So no video, okay? Must come in person, and we're requiring 2 forms of government ID. Is that a little bit overkill? I don't think so. I really think that this highest risk people, the department really doesn't expect us to disperse aid for these students. So if we disperse aid for these students, then we better have real good documentation. And we even have someone who as part of the campus that is very, very excellent at seeing and noticing what's a fake ID and what's not. I think I can, but this person can. So it's in our policy that he should be at the meeting with the financial aid administrator and checking that ID. That's the extreme that we're taking it to. And I think we have to take it that seriously. I'm going to skip this slide, so for the sake of time. So what I want to point out here, and this is really, really important, and Dan and Chris, I'm not sure if you know this yet, or noticed it, or thought about it, but after, I don't know how the laser works, after a school satisfies the identity check, and we send that information to the department, the original code disappears and it comes back as a 358. So what if you have a transfer student and there's a 358 on the ISAR? I, for one, and those that know me, and there's several in the room that do, I, for one, will not accept another school's verification, another school's professional judgment. We don't have to do it again. It's not required, but I just don't accept it because there's not, the people here represented are very good financial aid administrators, the two in front of me, and they know what's going on. But the bottom line is our policy is we do not accept professional judgment, verification, and certainly identity verification of a high-risk student. So what we are now doing is when the 358 comes in, okay, the system, PeopleSoft, reads that ISAR, and the student is automatically getting a notice saying that we realize that you were approved previously, but we need to redo that. And we don't know what the original code was. We don't know if it was the high risk or the highest risk. We don't know which of our policies to put in place for that particular student. So that communication is saying we need a copy of, if we don't have their last name, social security, and date of birth already, and it's likely that we would, but if we don't, then we need something called a DRN number, and with that DRN number, we can go in and take a look at the original code, and that's what we're doing at Berkeley. Okay, we're looking at that original code, and we'll put the student through the appropriate process based on what the original coding was. So that's a really important point. So best practices for institutions to prevent FAFSA fraud and protect Title IV funds. It's an institution responsibility. It's like, again, a Title IV audit is a full institution. It's an institution responsibility. And again, I count on our technology people at Berkeley and the other schools I work with to do what they do, and they do a great job. I actually had the conversation with John. I said that I think, or that most of the APC schools are doing a great job with what he does and passing their Title IV, audits in that case. Because that's what I think about APC schools, and that's my experience with APC schools. But it is a full institutional responsibility. Okay, early detection and front-end controls is really, really important, and that's why you need the policies and procedures in place, and you need that training. So early fraud protection account holds can help. So what the department is asking us to do now, and this is actually a summary of a recent Dear Colleague letter or maybe an electronic announcement of what they think best practices are for this. So this is actually their information. I just sort of summarized it. Okay, the first thing is, again, early fraud account holds. For example, if you are detecting fraud in the financial aid office, are you holding that student from registering? Are you doing other things institutional-wide to protect the school from this potential fraud? And that's what the department is looking for us to do. Common risk triggers. Triggers include inconsistent documents, unusual address changes. I'm not exactly sure what an unusual address change is, but I suppose if the student is living in Manhattan, going to the Manhattan campus, and all of a sudden they're putting California as their address, and then go online, then that's an unusual address change. That's just my imagination. Layered identity verification, as I said earlier, and tiered verification approach, which is lower risk cases have standard checks, and then the higher risk cases have the higher checks, which again, I've given you a lot of detail on already. Campus-wide coordination and enrollment monitoring is really important. So I guess the real message that the department was said in that Dear Colleague letter is that your institution is responsible for it, not just the financial aid office. cross-departmental escalation. So again, if something happens at the financial aid level, it's to be spread around the entire school that this is a potential at risk. And also one of the things, and I'm not sure if I have in the slide, is I found interesting. I don't know how many of our schools are attendance taking, but to take attendance, or rather to look at attendance before making disbursements. Is this student really here? Is this a real student? Okay, can an instructor confirm that the student has the little in place in the chair? So that's one of the things that they're asking us to do if you're in attendance taking school. If you're not, then you work around whatever kind of way you track students. Ongoing monitoring, refund protecting, and reporting, again, before making large refunds. Once again, check attendance and all those things that could be checked. Basically, again, final word here is that the department is asking the entire institution to be part of this practice. It's not just a financial aid responsibility anymore. I've already gone over the red flag. Of course, everyone should know about referrals to the OIG. I think most schools should at least encounter 2 or 3 situations a year where they're reporting to the OIG. Okay? If you have, any suspicion of fraud, then you meet with the student, with a financial aid person, and so on, hopefully from student development or someplace else, so there's a third party. And if the determination is, yes, we believe this is fraud, that needs to be reported to the Inspector General's office. You will not, in 99% of the cases, you will not receive a response from the OIG. Okay? That doesn't mean they're not looking at it. The information that you give them, okay, and I'm quoting one of the Inspector Generals. The information you give them could be the last piece of the puzzle they need to find out a fraud ring. And you're not necessarily going to find out about it. So very rarely will you hear back. In fact, in all my years in financial aid reporting to the OIG, I've never heard back from the OIG. But I know that it's important information, and it's become that much more important now. And I believe this is my last slide. If it's not, my apologies. The department is now looking for student privacy legislation, and this is hot off the presses, and this really is more a political game than it is anything else, but it does speak to identification. They're trying to protect the non-citizens. So it's more of a political game than it is really a fraud game, but I thought it was important to include in this presentation. And that was my last slide. Good for me. There's our contact information, and if you have any questions for us, we are now ready to take them. Thank you.
Does anybody have any questions? Oh, we do. Dan, go ahead. Oh, wait, actually, here, let me give you the... Excuse me, Will.
Thanks, guys. This was great. This is kind of a combination question for both of you based on, Howard, what you were saying with how you were advising Berkeley for those highest risk frauds that they have to come in, but most of them are going to be online. And so I kind of more posing it towards Don a little bit. What would you suggest as an alternative? Like if the come in the office is not possible and we still want to be able to verify that student. Like I don't want to lose that student necessarily just yet. Like, what would be a good alternative, that would make you feel a little bit more warm and fuzzy, to be able to move forward?
It was my thing, so I'll answer first. And the answer is there is nothing I could possibly think of that John's going to say that would make me feel warm and fuzzy about a highest risk student and then dispersing aid to them. So the answer is I can't think of a thing that doesn't exist, or if it does exist, I'm not aware of it, and maybe it will soon exist, but
I would say ditto, but there is one thing I heard of recently where it wasn't related to financial aid, but how you, to combat some of the AI challenges, a lot of the AI right now, as much as we think it's advanced, it's somewhat in its infancy also, where people are on a video call and they're doing the video part of it, but if you, my sister happens to be a recruiter for a large company and they've started to do this. They want people to use their hands, to wave, to do things. And that's one of the things AI isn't good at yet. But it will get better at it. So in other words, if I'm sitting here like this, all you get is, the headshot. If that's all the AI is capable of doing, if you ask the person to stand up, to pick up something, those sorts of things, it's all in its infancy. So unfortunately, there is no magic that I can think of off the top of my head, unfortunately.
I just want to add one thing, thank you. That who in the room doesn't think that most of the identity fraud in financial aid is coming from online students? Who doesn't think that? Thank you. I mean, it's just what it is. If you end up losing a couple of students at the end of the day, the department has nailed these students as the highest risk. They couldn't confirm it. And if we can't confirm it in the way I feel comfortable, okay, I'm speaking for myself, then there's no way in heck do I want the school to disperse aid to those students.
All right, hold on, Christopher.
So I think it's an interesting dynamic because who in the room believes that the department is always right in what they do? So that the department is infallible in their efforts to detect something like this, and I'm not, and I'm agreeing with our presenters that we need to be really, really careful because we're held accountable for what we accept or what we don't accept. So if we're ignoring these flags, then that we're certainly in a position to put our institutions at high risk. But I say that in realizing that we may have scenarios in which we find that the department got it wrong.
Let me just say one thing. And if you disagree with this, I'll be shocked. Okay. If a school makes one error, one student got work study more than what they should have or during the time they were supposed to be in school, that's a finding. One error out of thousands, that's a finding. The department could totally, excuse my French, screw up the FAFSA and there's no accountability. The bottom line is we're at the mercy of the department. And if they think that's the highest risk, we have to address it accordingly. That's my opinion.
All right, any other questions? Thank you, Christopher, that was good.